Hi, so welcome to my December wrap up. This month, well, no, last month I read 13 books, which is not as much as the last couple of months before. I read like 14 in November, I think, and 15 in October or something like that. But in terms of the pages, I read more in December than I did in November, and that's because like the books are just thicker. I didn't read any novellas or anything like that. And yeah, so I actually read less in December. However, I was able to like use audiobooks for the first time. So yeah, that's why I read more pages, I guess. And I guess I want to talk about the three audiobooks that I listened to first. The first one is actually nonfiction. It's Jason Hickel's, what's it called? Less is More, which is a book about degrowth. It's a topic that I've always been interested in based on like YouTube video essays that I've seen over the years. And so I decided to read a book, like actually read a book instead of just watching video essays. And yeah, it was a pretty good one. I think this book will work if you're already aware of why capitalism is bad. Like if you're someone who doesn't think capitalism is bad, then you probably wouldn't enjoy reading this book. So yeah, but yeah, it's really insightful about degrowth, and it's very easy to understand as well. It's not like complex, and yeah, it's kind of optimistic in a way because it sees the world as something that is able to change, and I don't have that kind of optimism necessarily, the same optimism that the author seems to have, but what do I know? He definitely knows more than me anyway, so maybe he's right. The other two audiobooks are all fiction. The first one is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. So I'm actually reading another Robert Jackson Bennett, which is this American Elsewhere, and I'm liking this a lot more than I like Foundryside, but it was good. It was like high fantasy, urban high fantasy, I guess, and it has like the type of magic system that you would see in like a Brandon Sanderson book, a very hard magic system that feels more like science than magic. So if you like that kind of stuff, then you should probably give that one a try. I think I'm still gonna read the sequels or listen to the sequels, but it wasn't the best book ever or anything like that. I thought like there was a lot of clunky things about it, especially the writing and like just the info dumps. But yeah, the magic is really fascinating and probably one of the stronger parts of the book, along with the characters. Even though like some of the writing is not the best, it's still quite enjoyable. And finally, the third audiobook that I listened to is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. So this is the author's debut. I've read the author's second novel, The Spear Cuts Through Water, which I thought was one of the best books I've ever read. But this one is not quite there. It's the debut novel, so it makes sense. I thought it had a lot of potential. It showed a lot of potential, especially when it comes to the prose and the way the book utilizes like point of view and the way it switches point of view. It does show. It did show a lot of potential, which I think was fulfilled in the author's second book. I think like the writing and the way it uses POV is similar between the two books, but in The Spear Cuts Through Water, it's just so much better. Like the author has already perfected that style of writing. And yeah, other than that, like the books are quite different. This is sci-fi and Spear Cuts Through Water is fantasy. And this feels like a bit cozy, like kind of like Becky Chambers-esque, but also not quite. It's not like everything is just chill all the time. There are times where there are, there are times where the stakes are quite high. There are a lot of action and so on. But yeah, a lot of it does remind me of that type of cozy sci-fi. And yeah, it's pretty good. I thought the characters were definitely the strongest part. The plot, not so much, but again, it's cozy, so it's not really about the plot. But yeah, still, I think I gave it like a 4 out of 5. when, like, on the other hand, I gave the author's second book a 5 out of 5, and it was one of my favorite books of all time. Yeah, those are the books that I read. I listened to on audiobook. And now for the books that I read using on my Kindle, I guess. There are 10. The first one is this Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. Is it M.L. Wang or M.L.? Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce names. I'm sorry. But yeah, so this book is from the author of Sword of Kaiken, which is a very popular like indie fantasy. I believe this is also indie, and I don't really read a lot of independent books for no particular reason. I just don't. And I heard this sort of Kaiken is spectacular. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I decided I wanted to get to this first because it seems a bit more up my alley. It's dark academia. It deals a lot with things like colonialism and imperialism, and yeah, so it's kind of like Babel in that way, but very different because this is high fantasy while Babel is historical fantasy. But yeah, I really like this. I think there are a lot of very insightful things about this, and it's not just that, but the magic system, the plot itself is also excellent. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave this like 4 out of 5, or I mean 4.5 out of 5, which is like one of the best books I've read in 2023. Next we have a sci-fi book, and that is, hold on, it's Bridge by Lauren Beukes. This is sci-fi, time travel, no, not time travel, alternate realities, like parallel realities, thriller, and yeah, it was good, but it wasn't like exceptional or anything. It has a lot of very good thriller. Like the thriller part is good, the sci-fi part is enough, I guess, and the main character is not the most interesting character in the story, which is a bit problematic because he ideally you would want the main character to be the most interesting one, but she is outshined by some of the other characters, which, yeah, they're good, but the main character is not very compelling. And yeah, again, the thriller part is really good, so if you're looking for that, then yeah, you should check that out. The next book I read is another fantasy, and that is Godkiller by Hannah Gaynor. So this book, yeah, I don't know about this book. I think this is one of those books that I rated like 3 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5 that I just don't have a lot to say about. It was okay. I think I'm gonna read the sequels maybe. It's like epic fantasy, I guess you could say. And yeah, to be honest, I've forgotten a lot about this book for some reason. Like books that I read earlier in the year, I still remember a lot of, even if I didn't love them. But for some reason, this is just like, I've forgotten a lot about this book. I remember, I think, the characters being like, I don't know, not the best. I don't know, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but again, I just don't remember much about this book. I don't really have a lot to say about this book, so yeah, apparently that's just how it is. So the next book I read was another urban fantasy, which takes place in like a high fantasy world, and that is City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is not a very popular Tchaikovsky book, like even he has another like fantasy series which is more popular. I think it's called Shadow of the Apt or something like that. I haven't read that one. I just read this one because I thought the cover was really cool. So yeah, and this book is about a city, and the city is like in chaos, I guess, because of one reason or another. And this book follows basically a lot of people in the city, and I just like the way it switches between characters. Like, it seems like this book feels epic, even though it just takes place mostly in a single city, and maybe some parts slightly outside the city, but mostly it's just in a single city, but it feels really epic. And it's just, you know, the depth of the characters are really impressive, even though we don't really get to see them all that much because we have a lot of characters to follow. And yeah, it is a bit difficult to get into because of that. But I thought the writing was really good. I don't remember Tchaikovsky's writing all that much. I haven't read too many of his books. I've read Children of Time, which I love, but I don't think the writing here is similar to that. I mean, the genre is completely different. So yeah, there's a sequel that came out in December, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I really need to, because a lot of people said that it's even better. So yeah, I'm gonna get to that this month, I hope. What's next? Oh yeah, the next books are basically, well, no, this is also fantasy. I was gonna say it's all sci-fi, but that's not true. This is another cozy fantasy, I guess. It's Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. So this book is very well loved. I think I've seen a lot of people liking it on BookTube and on Goodreads and so on. I liked it as well, but probably not as much as most readers did. I like this type of cozy fantasy because it is also kind of like, weird, what's it called? Weird stories in weird cities, which is the type of story that I really like, or like rural fantasy. I hate that word, but yeah, it's rural fantasy in like a fictional like Scandinavian country, and it has a lot of like fairies, obviously, and there's a very slow burn romance which I didn't really care about. I mean, it was not the most compellingly written romance I've ever read, let's just say that. But a lot of people seem to like that part, so you might like it. But yeah, I thought this was okay, but there's a lot of times where I felt like it was too cozy. And I know that it's kind of like the point of cozy fantasies, and I do have some cozy fantasies that I've loved, but it feels like it's sometimes a bit too cozy, even though there are action scenes here still. But yeah, I don't know, I wasn't the biggest fan of this book. I still might read the sequel, who knows. I mean, it comes out this month, if I'm not mistaken. And here we have another fantasy, kind of, and the title is really long, so yeah. The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Cranor, the third book in the Welcome to Night Vale series. So this series, I love the first two books. This one is quite different though. It doesn't focus on Night Vale all that much. It focuses on one of the side characters in Night Vale, or like one of these tiny, like insignificant characters in Night Vale, and we get to see her backstory basically. So it's historical fiction with a little bit of like rural fantasy, but not that much, which unfortunate because that's the part of Night Vale that I love. And even though this, like the historical fantasy aspect of this is, I thought, done really well, I thought it was not as convincing as it could have been. I don't know, maybe it's just because it's a lot of alternate history as well. So yeah, I think the writers certainly pulled it off decently, but I think their rural fantasy is just a lot better. And I mean, because that's what they do, they make Welcome to Night Vale, I mean the podcast, so they know a lot about it. And the parts of this book that takes place in Night Vale, I thought was really good. But the historical fantasy or alt history, whatever you want to call it, parts are okay. They're not the best, but yeah, it's a very standard, well, maybe not standard, but it's not that surprising. It's a very standard, like what's it called, revenge story, and it's a female rage story, I guess you could say. And yeah, if you like that kind of thing, you can read this without reading anything from like the previous two books or listening to the podcast at all, like it doesn't matter. You can just pick this up and read it without knowing anything about Night Vale, which is one of the things that I love about these books, these Night Vale books. Yeah, now we get to basically all sci-fi, I believe. We have... Okay, so we have this, which is Ancillary Sword by Ann Leckie. I'm not sure if this is the second or third book in the series. I keep mixing them up. I'm pretty sure this is the second book. I apologize if I'm wrong. But yeah, assuming this is the second book, it's very different from the first book. It's very cozy. Like, it's almost cozy sci-fi. Like, there's a lot of people just sitting around and drinking tea and just talking, which is really weird when the first book is a lot of action. But it works somehow. Like, I like this better than the first book. A lot better, in fact. And maybe I just had too high of an expectation for the first book because it won all of those awards. Like, it won a lot of awards. But this book, I thought, was well executed, even better. And the characters are not just the characters, but the themes that the characters kind of represent. I think it was done better than it was in the first book, even though the plot is just kind of slow. Like, it's not even space opera. There's barely any space, and the opera part doesn't really take place in space anyway, so you can't really call this book space opera, even though the series is. And yeah, I really like this second book. And I also read the third book, which is, hold on, where is it? I think it's this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's this. And that is Ancillary Mercy, also by Ann Leckie, obviously. I read a lot of Ann Leckie this month, so I mean in December, so yeah. This is a bit more like the first book with a lot more action. It was a really satisfying ending, which, yeah, I wasn't really expecting that considering the second book, but it ended really satisfyingly and with a lot of action that was still really well done. And yeah, there are a lot of like loose plot threads which the next books in the series picked up. So yeah, it was really nice. I didn't like this as much as the second book, I think, but it was still pretty good. And then I read the next book in the series. Well, technically this isn't part of this trilogy because this is standalone, and that is Provenance by Ann Leckie. This takes place in a whole other part of the universe, of the Imperial Radch universe. I think that's what it's called. And there weren't any like recurring characters from the trilogy, if I remember correctly, maybe one or two. But yeah, this is my least favorite book in this universe. It tried to be a lot of different things, but it didn't really work, and it feels confused. And yeah, I didn't like this all that much. The main character is not very likable and like never become likable. So yeah. Fortunately, the next book that I read is a lot better. Again, it's from Ann Leckie, and that is Translation State, which is one of the best books I read in 2023. I mean, from 2023 that I read in 2023. Yeah. So this is a lot better. It's about a Presker translator, which is like a part of the trilogy that we didn't really get to see much of. Like, we get to see two Presker translators, but we didn't really know much about them, how they live and how they were grown up, I guess. And here we do, and it's really fascinating, and it has a lot of themes of identity and self-discovery, which are themes that the first three books also like had, but here it's explored in a different way. And here we actually get a lot of like diplomacy stuff and a lot of multi-POV, which we didn't really get in the other books in the series. And yeah, it's just done so well. And of course, there are a lot of explorations about gender and family, which is just amazing when Ann Leckie does it. I don't know, she just does it really well. So yeah, I love Translation State. Next we have, what else do we have? Not much. I think that's all. Yeah, I think that's all the books that I read. 10, and then the 3 audiobooks. So yeah, 13 books. And yeah, it was a decent reading month, and I don't think I'm gonna read as much as that this month because I'm going on a vacation. So yeah, we'll see, I guess. So yeah, if you enjoyed that video, then feel free to leave a like and maybe subscribe. And yeah, see you next time.